with one swing from an axe, scores of lives, slowly ended. Following the U.S.-Dakota War of 1862, debate arose between the Minnesota state and federal officials as to the fate of 303 Dakota prisoners. Abraham Lincoln diplomatically evaluated each man's case before concluding 40 of the convicted men were guilty of various war crimes. On December 26, 1862, 38 of these men were publicly hanged. Although the execution of these Dakota warriors was a tragedy, Lincoln's diplomacy spared lives and allowed justice to be served for Dakota and Minnesotans. In 1851, the Dakota and the U.S. government signed the Treaty of Traverse des Sioux, which transferred ownership of much of southeastern Minnesota Territory to the United States. In return, the U.S. government promised to give weekly rations and $3,700,000 paid in monthly installments to the Dakota. In late 1862, a delay in these rations caused widespread starvation. As a result, the Dakota waged a war. This marked the beginning of a traumatic 5 weeks. Although rarely mentioned in textbooks, Little Crow, the Dakota's leader in battle, did not want to go to war. He agreed to command the warriors regardless because no other Dakota stepped up to the position. During battle, the Dakota were at a great disadvantage as the United States had considerably greater manpower and advanced weaponry. The United States was victorious after only 5 weeks of war. Apart from the 38 hanged, over 500 settlers, along with about 150 Dakota warriors, were killed during the war. Following the war, debate arose between Minnesota federal officials and the U.S. government as to how many of the Dakota prisoners should be executed. Some strongly felt that all Dakota deserved to be killed, such as General John Pope, commander of U.S. Army troops during the Dakota War, who wrote in a letter to politician Henry Sibley, quote, "The horrible massacres of women and children and the outrageous abuse of female prisoners still alive call for punishment beyond human power to inflict. There will be no peace in this region by virtue of treaties and Indian faith. It is my purpose to utterly exterminate the Sioux, if I have the power to do so, and even if it requires a campaign lasting the whole of next year. Destroy everything belonging to them and force them out of the plains, unless, as I suggest, you can capture them. They are to be treated as maniacs or wild beasts, and by no means as people with whom treaties or compromises can be made." End quote. There was also debate between the citizens of Minnesota concerning whether or not any of the men deserved to be hanged. Some Minnesotans believed none of the Dakota men should have their lives ended, while others strongly believed all of the Dakota on trial should be executed. And as is with all debates, there were many people with middle ground opinions. Beginning around 8 o'clock one night, Abraham Lincoln, president at the time, diplomatically evaluated each of the 303 trial cases. He worked into the early morning reading through the cases. He took note that each prosecution lasted a mere 3 minutes. Lincoln also noticed no Dakota language translators were present at the hearings, making the Dakota men unaware of what the Americans were saying pertaining to their sentencing. After evaluating each case, Lincoln issued death warrants to 40 of the accused men, 38 of which were in custody at Fort Snelling. 10 a.m., December 26, 1862. These 38 Dakota warriors are led to a scaffold specially constructed for their hanging. One man is given a reprieve at the last minute, for he was mistaken as another Dakota man. Unfortunately, a Ho-Chunk man who was being held in jail for public drunkenness was hanged instead to replace the reprieved man's place on the scaffold. The 39th Dakota man who had been issued a death warrant but was not executed along with the other 38 warriors was found shortly after and hanged. The remaining convicted Dakota is rumored to have committed suicide. These men are what the term Dakota 38 plus 2 refers to, as all 40 were issued death sentences on the same day, but 2 were not hanged along with the others. As the men took their places on the scaffold, they sang a Dakota song. White muslin coverings were pulled over their faces, and drum beats signaled the start of their execution. The Dakota men held each other's hands, and with one swing from an axe, the rope that held the platform was cut. 38 lives slowly ended as 4,000 people witnessed the largest mass hanging in history. Although these lives are irreplaceable, Abraham Lincoln's decision to spare those of the 265 men, while still approving 40 death sentences, allowed for a somewhat satisfying end to various debates. Though in an excessively brutal manner, Lincoln's diplomacy served justice to 40 men, while preventing more unnecessary casualties.
Abraham Lincoln was someone who tried to find middle ground in all things.
Directly after the Warren hangings, the majority of Dakota prisoners who were not hanged were interned at Fort Snelling. Many died.
It was somewhere between 1/3 and 2/3, which is, that's a pretty big difference.
The prisoners were then exiled out of Minnesota and onto reservations in South Dakota, North Dakota, Iowa, and Nebraska. Children were left orphaned with no government agency to help them, and families were left broken. A law was passed banning Dakota people from returning to their homeland. At the time, Lincoln was under the belief that he was providing a service to the Dakota when signing the exile order, thinking that the white citizens of Minnesota would commit violent acts against the surviving Dakota if they were to remain in the state.
Federal law was passed that forbade the Dakota people from living in Minnesota. They were removed to other states.
Shortly thereafter, the government took on a policy of re-education.
Literally, the notes that come out about how it was to go about was they were to kill the Indian to restore the soul.
Indigenous people were denied the practice of their religions and the ability to speak their native languages. To commemorate the Dakota 38+2, a memorial ride and run event is held annually. Horseback riders and distance runners ride or run from Lower Burrell in South Dakota to Mankato in Minnesota. The journey is 330 miles for riders, the distance marched by the 38 Dakota warriors on the way to their execution. The run is a shortened 90-mile relay. There was a ceremony a number of years ago in Mankato, Minnesota, inviting the Dakota back to their homeland, despite the federal law that prohibits their dwelling in the state. Additionally, if you go to Mankato today, you would likely encounter descendants of white settlers who were killed during the war and have a long-stemming grudge against the natives. You can also find Dakota citizens who resent whites for exiling them out of their land. Abraham Lincoln's choice to hang 40 men instead of the convicted 303 spared lives while serving justice. Lincoln diplomatically evaluated each case before deciding these 40 men's crimes warranted execution. Today, the Dakota lives lost are commemorated in many ways, one being the annual ride and run event from Lower Burrell to Mankato, Minnesota. Additionally, there is a memorial for the Dakota 38+2 located at Reconciliation Park in Mankato. Though left untold for many decades, Dakota history is being uncovered.
The understanding of the Dakota side of the story is now becoming more and more clear thanks to work that has been done over the last 50 years.
However, it has been argued that the greatest long-term impact on the Dakota people has been having to live with the fact that the largest mass hanging in history happened on their homeland to their people.